Welcome back, everybody. Today we'll be talking about the brain. In particular, we'll talk about the structures and functions of the brain, and then we'll discuss a little bit about methods for studying the brain. So there are two major components of the nervous system. There's the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system has two parts as well, the brain and the spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system also consists of two parts, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. So we'll get a chance to talk about all of those today. Of note is that the spinal cord and brain are cushioned by this stuff called cerebrospinal fluid. This is generated by the ventricles in the brain, and here you can see those. There are lateral ventricles, third ventricles, fourth ventricles, and so forth. And you can learn more about those at these two websites below. You can see here a couple other components listed in the hindbrain. The hindbrain, which is this area back here in the hind area of the brain appropriately, these include the medulla, this area here, the pons here, and the cerebellum, this large structure right here at the base of the brain. The medulla merges with the spinal cord and contains large bundles of fibers, basically. They're nervous fibers, nerve fibers, I should say, axons, traveling to and from higher levels of the brain. So it communicates things down here with all of these other areas of the brain. It manages lots of essential functions like heart rate and blood pressure, and as a result, damage to these areas result in quick death. Now, it's important to note, as we talk about these lower level structures here, you'll notice that they're typically involved in pretty primitive actions. They're not necessarily the higher level cognition and decision making and things like that we're talking about, but these would be the components that are shared with things like smaller animals, much more lower level and less sophisticated animals than ourselves. Whereas the cerebral cortex tends to be the area where an awful lot of what we think of as thinking is going on. These areas will be more related to things like respiration and heart rate or heartbeat and perception and so forth. So we'll talk about what some of those are. The pons, this area here, sits above the medulla and is involved in the management of sleep, arousal, facial expressions, and so forth. And it also connects the cerebellum to the rest of the brain. So you can see here, the pons are also involved in some pretty low-level types of activities. The cerebellum, this large area here at the base of the brain, is critical for maintaining our balance and our motor coordination. Interestingly, it's one of the first brain structures that are affected by alcohol, which is why you lose some of your coordination and so forth when you drink alcohol. Recent research also suggests that the cerebellum is involved in a range of functions, including language and so forth, as well as perception.